Debating kind of taught me everything. It was at the time when I started male-dominated. So I was usually the only woman on an all-male team, and I was usually getting feedback that was really different to my male peers. They were complimented even for their gravitas and their presence, and I was told, hey, that's interesting, but it's a little bit too much, or a little bit too angry, or a little bit too aggressive.
Sometimes feels like such a narrow tightrope we walk, right? To be enough, but not too much. From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about the changing nature of work and how that work changes us. That feeling of walking on a tightrope, that feeling that so many of us are familiar with, especially women, well, there's a name for it. It's called the success likability paradox. It's that whole idea that in order to become powerful, well, a woman has to be likable. But then once she becomes powerful, she is less likable. You know, for men, it works just the opposite, right? The more powerful men become, the more people like them. It can feel downright frustrating. But our guest today, Kate Mason, she says it doesn't have to be that way. She is an author, an executive coach, and a world champion debater. Kate has a new book out with a great title. It is called Powerfully Likeable: A Woman's Guide to Effective Communication. Kate believes that you can be likable and extremely powerful at the same time. The path to that end is successful communication. And today, in the time she has with us, she's going to walk us through exactly how we can communicate well. Here's Kate.
Communication is so foundational to everything, and yet we don't teach it. And I wanted to think about if it underlies everything that we do,
Right.
what are the ways that we could think about turning up those levers to help amplify what we're already doing?
Right. You know, I remember going to college, and at college there was a professor who was so popular, and her name was Professor Barbara Tenenbaum, and she taught public speaking. And now I think back at the way that she taught it, put both feet on the ground, speak from the diaphragm, issue control. But when I really reflect on it, so much of it also feels very gendered, very masculine even. And it leads me to think about the notions I have for what authoritative conversation looks like.
Yes, I have this pet theory that it's from the newsreader. Think to like the 1950s newsreader, right?
The Walter Cronkite, the Dan Rather.
Exactly. So they are older men. They're a little crinkly, wrinkled,
Yes.
right? And they give you this calm, this is what happened today. I'm the voice of authority. And I can't help but think that that's really impacted the way we think about authority, that is the person. And even though those people have changed and we have a different cast of characters, even think about late night, it's often, you know, an older man telling us how it is.
Right.
And I think that's really transposed itself into a corporate landscape in a similar way.
Well, I think it gives everybody, men and women, a sense of comfort that comes strictly from what we are used to, what we've grown up with. But you offer a different path to authority, into commanding authority.
Yes.
Help me to understand that.
So I think when we think about authority, it is often coded male. And many of us in leadership have decided, well, I'll try to masculinize to access that authority. That must be the gateway toward it. And I wanted to really push against that in this book to say that there are lots of ways to have authority. And in fact, that binary of being either powerful or likable, which kind of feels like the only option a lot of women feel, that binary doesn't exist. And in fact, there's a whole different array of ways we can show up in between that.
Okay, so you are articulating what is sort of a ground rule for women in today's workforce, which is we all know that basic research for a very long time has suggested that as men become more powerful, they become more likable. We want to hear from the Walter Cronkites of the world. And as women climb that corporate ladder and become more powerful, often they become less likable. You take issue with that. You say, actually, there's another way.
I do. I think the way I would think about it is that on the journey to becoming powerful, there's lots of things that we can do that retain our own authenticity and retain senses of being likable. And to me, likability is very often encoded with or coupled with deference. And I really want to decouple that and say that likability by itself is actually liking being in someone's orbit, right? Enjoying someone's presence.
Right.
And that doesn't actually involve us being subservient or deferential to somebody else. It involves us just showing up as we are.
Okay, so let's talk about being differential. Because in spending time with your material, I began to truly reflect on all the ways in which I am differential all the time without even thinking about it. I'll give you a big thesis around something I'm thinking about. And then, because I don't want to have overwhelmed you and I don't want to have put you in a position where you might disagree with me, I leave a side door open and I say, I don't know, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It's a tactic. It's not doing me any favors, is it?
It's not. Why it's not is that there are other ways you could do the same thing but not discredit yourself in the process.
Right.
So you could say, I've talked for ages. I would so love to hear your thoughts. Right? It's a very different way, but it doesn't diminish what you've just said. I often feel like one of the phrases like, does that make sense? Or no worries if not. We do all these different types of caveats or minimizations that actually subtly hint at we don't value what we've just said, or we don't value ourselves in that space.
Right.
And when other people aren't doing it around you, it can be really obvious.
Okay, so Kate, a lot of the beginning of your curiosity around this communication came from your early career in debating, right?
Yes, it did.
So tell me a little bit about what debating sort of taught you foundationally.
Debating kind of taught me everything. I started when I was very young, and it's one of those things that requires you both to think about how your arguments are landing, so in the moment understand the strategy that you're using and seeing what resonates with an audience, but also your manner and your presentation is counted and looked upon. So you're always coupling argument and content with delivery. How is it landing? Do I need to course correct or adjust?
Right.
It's particularly, or it was at the time when I started, male-dominated.
Yes.
So I was usually the only woman on an all-male team, and I was usually getting feedback that was really different to my male peers. And so it really, from a pretty young age, I started noticing that gendered nature of communication, that they were commented or complimented even for their gravitas and their presence. And I was told, hey, that's interesting, but it's a little bit too much or a little bit too angry or a little bit too aggressive. And I felt I was doing what they were doing.
Well, sure. What caused you to want to pursue it as one of the only young girls in the field when you were getting that kind of feedback? Let's start there.
I think it was like, okay, well, let's game on. Let's try. You know, I wanted to understand what I needed to do to win. I think I'm pretty competitive. Right. But the other part of it was in hindsight, the only place in my life that I had permission to be angry or to take a flaw and to take a strong position on something. Especially as young girls, we're not often given that place.
Right.
And that was very compelling to me. Like, I could kind of have a rant about something and it be socially acceptable.
Well, it's interesting that you use the word anger in talking about debate, because debate is actually having conviction.
Yes.
And one thing I think might be gendered is that when women have conviction about something, we're very quick to call them angry. Like the prototype of the angry mother, for example.
Yes.
I'll tell you, I have a lot of conviction about my son's Nintendo use this morning. And he would have told you when I was making my strong argument to put it away that I was angry with him.
Yes.
I wasn't. I was just very convinced of my platform.
Yes. Yeah, I think conviction and anger are often really similar because they both evoke that strong emotion, right? Part of debate is also about understanding, even though I may be feeling these things, what's the best strategic emotion to deploy in this situation that's going to get me what I need?
Right.
Do I need to be right, or do I need to get what I need, or do I need to be both at the same time? And sometimes those are going to be different answers, and sometimes the strategies you're going to be using are slightly different too.
So when men and women move into community together and a work culture, are there different approaches that men and women should be using that are gendered, or are you more interested in approaches that are authentic to them that may or may not be shaped by gender?
I'm much more interested in the latter. I'm much more interested in less performative and more who you actually are. So I'll give you an example. If someone tends to be more abrupt and transactional by nature, they don't do small talk, it's not their vibe, I don't want to encourage them to start doing small talk and change functionally who they are. But I might give them strategies for making their abruptness or their transactional nature a little more understood by others, right? So that might be something like calling out, I'm abrupt by nature, right? I'm a very transactional person. Don't mind me if I'm going to be a little blunt about these things. That's just how I love to dive into it. You know, that'll help give an invitation to everyone else. Oh, right, that's how she is. And they are more able to then jump on board with you.
When you're working specifically with women, what are the most frequent challenges they come to you with?
They're either on either pole, right? So they're either told, I've been told I need to be more confident. I need to sort of step into this power I've never felt comfortable with.
Right.
I've been given a promotion, etc. So they're on this side of the spectrum, or I've been told I'm too aggressive, I'm too much, I'm too angry, etc. And I need to work out how to modulate or exist on other parts of the spectrum to be able to be more effective and communicate with my team.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, it sometimes feels like such a narrow tightrope we walk, right? To be enough, but not too much.
It's not only a narrow tightrope, it's that there are many tightropes that intersect underneath us, right? There's so many that require us to be very dexterous about how emotionally caring, how visibly performative we are about certain things. The best advice I give people is, where is your power or your energy usually up? Where is it usually really strong? And how do we amplify or give you more opportunities to exist in that space? And then when does it feel weak? When does it feel low? Or will you walk out of a meeting and think, ugh, that didn't go as I wanted? Then what are the strategies we use to help you mitigate in those periods? And that looks really different for everybody.
That's really interesting. And it's an interesting approach to begin with the self-audit. Okay, so I want to talk about one of my least favorite phrases in corporate America.
Please.
Executive presence.
It's one of my least favorite too. I was wondering which one you might say. It's a supremely unactionable and stupid term.
You heard it here.
I think most people hear it sometime in their career and we understand what it means, but at the same time, we really don't understand what it means. Like, does it mean I have to wear a blazer? Does it mean I have to have a briefcase? Does it mean I have to speak with a lower voice?
Right.
It's very unclear as to what that action means. I lump it with people telling other people to be more confident. It sounds good, and in theory, we know what it means, but it's a little bit like saying, be healthier.
Yeah.
That path to it is going to be really different for all of us.
Right. I mean, I think so often when I have heard it expressed to me, what's beneath it is someone asking me to figure out, by any means necessary, how to convey more authority.
Yes.
But the tools that I have at my disposal aren't working.
Yes.
So what I need is not arbitrary advice. It's a new tool set.
It's a new tool set. It's not a personality transplant. And I think that's what sometimes people fear, that it's like, I have to change my whole self, or I have to masculinize, or I have to, somehow ape the behaviors of someone else. This is the phrase I thought you were going to say before was fake it till you make it, which is my other clanger, right? Because why would you encourage inauthenticity, fakery, for then to pin your success to that? That feels very backwards.
Right. And also at the same time, I feel challenged right now by the whole notion of authenticity.
It's a great point.
I'm curious what your take on authenticity is.
I feel like for me, it's defined best as, when do you most feel like you've left an interaction or a conversation with, like, that went exactly as I wanted it, right? I felt exactly, I was able to convince someone, I was able to connect with someone. I had this moment of like real spark. That's probably close to your authenticity. And that's the best definition I can get to. Anything else feels very performative or for someone else. I'm more interested in for you.
Right. And the piece that I'm most compelled by in what you said is, like, when do you know you've hit connection with someone? It's also what leads you to be able to communicate well with someone.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so much of what you're talking about ultimately is, how do we open the best, most persuasive path to good communication?
Yes.
Right.
And that happens, that best persuasive path happens when we can kind of align bodies and minds. So what I mean by that is, sometimes communication feels like it's from the neck up, right? It's just our mouth talking. But we know in our bodies, if you've ever felt dread before a meeting, you know your body is not aligned, right, with a communication. So it's about being able to regulate our body and our verbiage at the same time, and make sure that that lands with the other person and it aligns with them. such that you've both kind of had a meeting of the minds.
Right.
And you've co-regulated in doing so.
I love this idea of co-regulating. What should I be paying attention to about my physical presence?
One of the things that I think people don't do well enough is listen, right? So many
It's
times
so hard.
it's so hard to listen.
Right.
If you're really listening, you are not actually plotting what you're going to say next.
Yeah.
And many of us, particularly in a work context, and particularly for younger people who have been told to develop executive presence, we're thinking, well, I've got to say something smart. I better start thinking about what that is.
Right.
And in doing so, we've lost the connection. Something you've said has passed me by and I haven't grasped it and I haven't been able to be agile and respond in an interesting way. I've come out with my pre-prepared answer.
Right.
And I think listening is the key to great communication because we're really making sure we understand where you've been heading.
Right.
And answering accordingly.
All right. So for those of us who are not preconditioned to listen because we are just so nervous about the next thing we're going to say or whether somebody's noticing the way that we're sitting or how we're talking, do you have any guidance for how to do it well?
One of the things that is really interesting when I think about leaders is the best, most authoritative leaders are often very calm. You don't see a frenetic CEO doing talking points. They're not, they have a very calm, solid energy. And actually that same person who's worried about what do I say next or how do I listen and how do I show up as communicative with authority, if they start by being calm and take time in their answers, and I don't mean like hours, but I mean, let me think about that. That's really interesting.
Right.
I think this is what I would respond with, right? Taking a moment is actually counterintuitively ended up looking very confident, right? It looks like you have presence, but you've really taken it to heart.
Right. And this is when I first ran across your advice not to fake it till you make it, what I thought was, yes, but sometimes I have to fake things I don't feel in order to feel them. And calmness is a great example. When I sit down with you, I'm going to tell you, Kate, I'm nervous to start interviewing you.
Right.
And the thing that I'm going to do is slow down because I know that that is a strategy. I'm faking that I am calm, but what will happen is my body will follow.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It 100% makes sense. And actually, you've described perfectly great communication, right? You've aligned your body and your mind. And sometimes we need to trigger our body by breathing or by swimming or singing or something that's a very regulating behavior to us in order to enter into that space. So it's training. I suppose it's nitpicking, but I don't call that faking. I kind of call that training or onboarding us into that next phase.
I'll take your nitpicking. I think that's totally fair. Yeah. Onboarding. There's a host of, 3 or 4 behaviors that we don't even realize we're doing to protect ourselves at any given moment.
We forget, I think, in a corporate context that we're animals, right? And oftentimes we're doing 100%. Things like crossing our arms is like a self-protection, right? I'm concerned, I'm worried about this thing, so I'm going to brace for impact. Yeah. And it's a very human response and it's very normal, but it's maybe not as appropriate at work where there's no physical impact coming in for most of us, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things to think about is when we're animals, there's another brain, this animal brain that's going on that's understanding and parsing what's happening in a way that's really distinct from the words that we might be using.
Right. I want to go back to this idea of kindness and the fact that you can be kind and you can be very likable and that can be important to you and that is okay and you can still convey authority. How do we begin to reintegrate the larger message that actually it's perfectly okay to be very likable and to be authoritative?
One of the things that in bringing two dissonant seeming things together, like power and likability, is that it intuitively feels a little bit odd or uncomfortable. Like, wait, those two things shouldn't come together, right? Yeah. But one of the things I try to do in the book is there's a whole host of behaviors that might be traditionally coded masculine, like rationality or assertiveness, and that might be traditionally coded feminine, like communality or empathy. And it's actually really generative and powerful to bring those two things together. So one of the exercises I run through is, are there things on these lists that resonate intuitively to you, right? That feel like, oh, yeah, that's who I am. Bringing them together can give us language to summon forth in a meeting, if you like, or bring ourself forward that feels like, oh, this is actually who I am. So part of it is language. So I had a wonderful person I was coaching who said, The words that jump out to me on these lists are ambitiously communal. And on the face of it, those two things don't go together, right? But she said, I'm super ambitious. I really, really want us to win, but I want my team to come with me. Like, I really want all of us to win. And I loved that. And for her, ambitiously communal, seemingly dissonant terms came together to give her, she's like, that's how I think about my leadership. Right. So some of it is just equipping us with the language that feels more like us and more, authentic in inverted commas, but that actually allows us then to show up in that meeting, summoning that self is a very different engagement.
Kate, you're somewhere in the middle of your career. You're not early, and you're certainly nowhere close to late. And I would be very curious to hear you reflect on culture broadly in the workplace. And I say that as a business reporter who, in the beginning of my career, reported on women where there was really only one model to be a leader. And the women who climbed to the top of the Fortune 500 companies often needed to comport themselves in every way like men, and maybe even over-rotate in that direction to be successful. It feels to me like perhaps the very models for what we are willing to accept in leaders have changed. Is that what the world looks like to you as you are out talking to clients?
I don't think we're at a point where it's like, oh, we have parity. Isn't it amazing? Like, we have all these CEOs who are women everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's not what the world looks like.
That's not what the world looks like. And I think that would be disingenuous to say otherwise. What I do think is changing is that people are understanding that leadership can look different. And I think that's part of the first step that we need to understand to then see those types of leaders coming to the top. Yeah. So the idea that we could give different language and show up a little bit differently automatically then invites us to think, that person who I didn't think maybe had executive presence in the same way.
Right.
She's actually really interesting on this point. Or that person over there, I'm recasting or recalibrating how I think about leadership. And that's, to me, very generative and interesting because it then allows us to see people differently and to hear their contributions, hopefully receive them differently.
So much of making that change is about understanding our own approach to leadership and to authority through communication, but also figuring out how to reflect back that new understanding to the organizations in which we find ourselves.
Yes.
And I'm curious if that's something you do a lot of coaching on as well.
A lot of the coaching I do is around that understanding my relational power. And what I mean by that is how am I interacting with people in a way that I can get the most cut through, the most persuasion, and leverage the things that I'm really good at. Yeah. When I'm working with someone who says I need to have more confidence, I ask a number of questions and I realize, everybody in this organization very well and very personally, right? You are actually hyper empathetic and very, very well connected. Right. Let's then use that, right? And I don't mean use it in a bad way, but utilize that in order to make that authority really clear, right? So if you know everybody really well and you've had conversations, your intel is excellent. You have great data, right? So it's a very different type of authority and using your own particular set of skills.
And just writing about women in powerful positions, I've observed time and time again that you will find no one better prepared than a woman in a traditional form of power. That is the person who is on the treadmill every morning with briefing documents preparing for the meetings ahead.
Yes.
It also feels like it can be debilitating the degree to which people over-prepare.
Yes. I'm very pro-preparation. I'm very anti-over-preparation. And of course, where's the line between those two things can be really difficult. But many of the women I work with over-prepare to a really unsustainable degree, right? They'll say, I need to run through this deck at least 35 times before I feel good about it. And that might be good for a one-off or a TED Talk, right? A very, very high-stakes thing. But if you have 8 meetings that day, you really can't be giving that level of attention to everything.
So how do we train ourselves out of that?
Well, I have 2 strategies that I think are really easy to think about. One is let's do 5% less. Every time we are about to prepare for something, let's just try and ratchet it down and see what happens, right? That's probably a good place to find the line for us between preparation and over-preparation, when we can start realizing, I did a little less and it was okay. Sky didn't fall in.
Right.
Let's try again the next time. So that's a really easy one to start today.
Sure.
The second one is give yourself 15 minutes. And this is based on my debating. In World's Debate, you have 15 minutes to write a 10-minute speech, which is actually a pretty long speech.
That's a really long speech.
Really long.
Yeah.
And so I know what I can do in 15 minutes.
Right.
15 minutes can be a very long time.
Right.
So I give a little bit of a breakdown as to like, if you only had 15 minutes to get ready for something, what does that look like?
Right.
Get comfortable with that forced shorter. And, if it's 20, that's okay.
Right.
But give yourself a very, very short, finite deadline to break the back of something, to think through a problem, to prepare for a meeting, and then see what that feels like. And it might be longer than 15 at the beginning. That's fine. But the point is to just boundary it and be very, very diligent about protecting that, such that you're training yourself, your mind and your body that this is really comfortable for me over time.
And this brings me to failure.
Yes.
The stakes are different when women fail than when men fail in any environment. What advice do you have for women around failure? Would you encourage it? Do you want to push them toward it?
Failure is so important to success. We don't get there without having tried a bunch of ways. And I think we intuitively know that and still shy away from failure. It doesn't feel fun, right? Mm-mm. I want us to reconceptualize failure a little bit as either experimentation or course correction or these softer ways of talking about it that actually give us credit. I have a lot of people who say to me, I started this job, it didn't work out, so I left after a couple months, I failed. Like, no, it would have been a failure if you had stayed there and it wasn't working. So give ourselves a little bit of credit that what we're doing sometimes is trying and course correcting, learning from it, moving forward. It's part of the journey. It's not something to run away from.
Yeah, I love that. We've covered so much ground. Is there anything that you would love to leave us with?
I think we all have such communicative power within us that we're underutilizing. And one of the things I think is really important to think about is good communicators can impart information. That's table stakes, right?
Yeah.
Gifted communicators can really change the room that they're in. They can read a room, they can help bring people along for the journey. And so thinking about the impact or the import of your communication is something that's never going to let you down. Yeah. So spend time on it, use it wisely, and leverage it where you need it to be.
That was Kate Mason. She is an author and an executive coach. Check out her new book. It's called Powerfully Likeable. And friends, as usual, I have 3 things that I want you to take away from this episode. If you remember nothing else, the first, and let me be clear, the most important, is that real authority comes from presence, from showing up exactly as you are, not from performance. That means listening well. It means slowing down, even when you have to really work at it. Second, we sometimes think that deference is the path to likability. It's socialized into us from birth. We shrink or make ourselves smaller. It's not working for you. You don't need to do that. Where are the ways in which you are doing that in your own life? Like truly, inventory them and see if you can just make small tweaks to get rid of them. And finally, Kate wants us to get comfortable with failure. Now, if I'm laughing here, it's because I'm so uncomfortable with failure. I don't like it. And frankly, the stakes are higher for women than for men when it comes to failure. But we also know that the biggest achievements come when we stretch the furthest, and we cannot do that if we're not comfortable being wrong sometimes. So Kate says, hey, call it experimentation. And I agree with her. Call it experimentation. Call it whatever you want. Just do it. Okay, it's going to be a great week for office hours this week. I hope you'll join us. We go live on Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern from the LinkedIn news page. You can find that link in our show notes. And if you liked this episode, well, consider leaving us a review. All right, that's it for this week. I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. I'll be right back here in the studio next week with more. Hello Monday is a production of LinkedIn News. Rachel Karp produced this episode with help from Lolia Briggs. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Sound design and engineering by Asaf Gadron. Our theme music was composed just for us by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Michaela Greer is a friend of the show forever. Thank you to LinkedIn's editorial associates Mujib Merdad and Alexandra Kuznetsova. Kyle Ranson-Walsh is editor-at-large of editorial graphics. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn.